Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here for the first of a series of 3 recruitment webinars this year for the CCST Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. Today's webinar is on why the CCST Fellowship. My name is Sarah Brady. I'm the Deputy Director at the California Council on Science and Technology and also an alumni of the Science Fellowship program. I'd like to open our briefing today by acknowledging that I am presenting to you in Sacramento, California, from the tribal land of the Nisenan people. Sacramento was a gathering place for many local tribes. We acknowledge the southern Maidu people to the north, the Valley and Plains Miwok peoples to the south of the Sacramento River, and we would also like to honor the Patwin-Wintun peoples to the west of the Sacramento River. Today, I'll provide a brief overview of CCST before introducing the 4 wonderful panelists I have on Zoom with me today. The California Council on Science and Technology is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization established over 30 years ago at the request of the legislature. Policymakers recognized that they needed timely, actionable science and technology advice from a trusted, independent source. So CCST was created to provide science and technology advice from the wealth of outstanding academic and research institutions in our state directly to policymakers. California is lucky to have such an incredible network of expertise, and our job at CCST is to help amplify and translate the expertise in this network into actionable advice for policymakers. We do this through a number of mechanisms, including expert briefings, we host workshops, and we write peer-reviewed reports when you need a deeper dive on a very specific topic. And of course, we're all here today to talk about the CCST Science Fellows program. Through the fellowship, we place PhD scientists and engineers for a year of government service and leadership training in the executive branch and the legislature. This fall, in a few weeks, we'll welcome our 13th cohort of fellows. In total, we've trained over 128 PhD scientists and engineers in science policy. I hope many of you will apply for the 2023 cohort when applications open in 6 weeks on December 1st. So why become a fellow? As a CCST Science Fellow, you will apply the skills you've developed in your research training to help advise policymakers and impact policies. This is a year of professional growth, exploration, and transformation, where you will gain important professional skills and leadership training. You'll also get a front row seat to witness and participate in the policymaking process in California. Why California? Well, California is a national leader in environment, science, and technology. Our state-level policies govern nearly 40 million people and have impacts beyond our borders. As a science fellow, you will be placed in a California state legislative office or executive branch office, where you will work as a full-time staffer. Each placement is different, and each placement has a lot to offer. CCST will provide you with the training and support you need to be successful throughout the fellowship. Prior to placement, you will go through a month-long intensive orientation and training to learn the ins and outs of California government and the policymaking process. During the fellowship, we'll continue to provide you with seminars and workshops to expand your network and learn new professional skills. Prior to the pandemic and remote work, we also sponsored field trips to enhance your understanding, and we're hopeful that's something we can do again this year. Alumni expressed that the fellowship was instrumental in their career development and created opportunities for them they would not have previously had access to. The vast majority of alumni stay in the policy world, and many stay specifically in California government. Here's a quote that expresses that sentiment. The fellowship will give you the structure, training, and access to help you chart your career path. So what are we looking for? We are looking for individuals who we expect to be able to thrive in the policymaking environment. This is a big culture change from academia, and requires you to be excellent communicators, great team players, flexible, and open-minded. We will be looking for these skills in your application materials and interviews. Now, let's talk about the timeline. The application for the 2023 cohort opens on December 1st. You don't have to have your PhD in hand to apply. We just require that you have a plan to finish your PhD by September of 2022 in order to be done by the time you begin your fellowship on November 1st. Thank you so much. We'll be transitioning now to some Q&A time with our 4 panelists. Please start asking your questions using the Zoom Q&A. And just a reminder, we will be having 2 additional webinars on the life of a fellow and also specifically on the application process. Also, please feel free to connect with us on social media and follow up via email if you have any questions or concerns that didn't get addressed in this Q&A. Now, I would like to introduce the panelists. We'll start with Dr. Jane Mantey. I'll have each of them introduce yourself and share why did you apply to and choose the CCST Fellowship, and how did the experience compare to your expectations? Jane.
Hey, Sarah. Should I hop right in?
Hop right in.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Dr. Jane. I'm a Mantey, formerly a year 6 fellow. I forget what we called it back in the day. When I was placed in Assemblymember Reginald B. Jones-Sawyer Sr., very long name. He represents South Los Angeles, formerly South Central, as I knew it, Los Angeles. He also was the former chair of the California Congressional Black Caucus when I was a fellow. While in his office, I covered everything related to STEM except for health policy. I was very particular about that. I don't like health policy. I could talk more about that later on. And I also covered anything related to LGBTQ issues and what have you. Currently, I am a senior manager of environmental justice, or EJ policy at Ceres. It's a Boston-based corporate sustainability consulting nonprofit, but I'm based in Fort Worth, Texas. And why did I want to become a fellow? So like some of you maybe, I was pretty active in student government, both in undergrad and in grad school. I was on the board of both the Grad Student Association, president of that, as well as, on just our college-wide professional, grad student, association. I went to a medical school. Anyway, but, while I was there, I really found my elements, in engaging with upper administrators, in talking through policy, and advocating for, the student body, and knew that's where I wanted to be and wanted to do. And then also with my research focus, which was on environmental toxicology and physiology and studying pollutants, I knew there was real world applications to what I was studying, and that I could be of utility in a government space, advising policymakers on how we can make data-driven, scientific-driven, policy decisions. And I figured CCST, I did not want to go to Congress. CCST would give me a great opportunity to go from the South to the West, to be in a hopefully more progressive science and affirming space to do this kind of work and to gain this kind of expertise. And also I just wanted to get involved in politics. It sounded fun. It sounds fun to be ripping and running through the halls trying to get something passed. And then the next questions I hop into as well, what my actual experience and what I thought. I will say before I pass back to Sarah that, my experience was a bit of what I thought it would be and a lot of what I didn't. And I say that in that I think a lot of people have this view of government being, this fierce tug of war battle, and there is that. But it also is a lot of, being crafty, how you be diplomatic, how you can sell what you're trying to, like to move. And so you actually use a lot of skills you develop in the lab which was surprising. It felt very much like a lab, being in an office, working with teams, picking up slack, finding ways to support each other and to make your member, who's very much like your PI, look good and strong and great at their job as a politician. I particularly loved it, and it was a great experience. I'll stop there for now. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Jane. Next up, Dr. Geoff Hollett. Can you tell us, why did you apply to the CCST Fellowship, and how did the experience compare to your expectations?
Yeah, hi all. My name is Geoff Hollett. I received my PhD in material science and engineering at the University of California, San Diego. I was a year 11 fellow, so I started training in November of 2019. I was placed in the personal office of Senator Bob Archuleta, who represents Southeast Los Angeles County and a little bit of Orange County, where I, similar to Jane, did anything STEM related, a lot of things not STEM related, basically whatever walked through the door that could benefit from that technical eye was within my portfolio. I'm currently a senior science policy analyst at the American Medical Association. I'm based out of Chicago, Illinois, where I do anything technical related for the AMA. So it's very similar in that sense. I applied to the CCST Science Policy Fellows program because I became a little disillusioned with the academic research environment at the end of my PhD. My dissertation project was in women's health, particularly with a global health bend. And contraceptive research is a very underdeveloped, very interesting, for lack of a better word, space. And then it's very boom or bust. It can change, the whole landscape could change within a few weeks based off administration priorities and a lot of factors that were outside of the academic space. So I really enjoyed the sort of mission-driven aspects and sort of the personal satisfaction I got out of my work, but really didn't like a lot of the sort of environment and the structures that were around academic research in this space. So I took a step back and, thought about how I could translate not only the things that I enjoyed about academic research, but the skills that I was strongest at, which I thought to be sort of my creativity and my communication skills, and how I could find a career to match that. Why CCST was because every year prior to us moving to a remote world, they run a science translators event, which takes folks in the California research ecosystem and brings them to the state capitol to see what it's like to talk to policymakers, to talk to policy staff, and get a little bit of training in how to do so. And I found it an incredibly gratifying experience, but also just recognizing sort of the strength of the organization, knowing that it shared a lot of the same values that I had, and recognized that it was a place that I wanted to be. Beyond what I learned from the Science Translators event, though, I had basically no expectations of what the fellowship would look like. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just knew that I did not want to stay in academia or in industrial pharmaceutical research. So I was just looking for any opportunity to get out, and I am so thankful that I did. It absolutely utilized the skills that I wanted to use, and I got the job satisfaction that I was so much missing in academia. So I'm so thankful for programs like this, and I absolutely would not have been able to secure my current position or anything else even remotely close to this without having a program like this.
Thanks, Geoff. Next up, we have Dr. Marika Nell. If you can tell us why you applied to the CCST Fellowship and how it compared to your expectations, or still is comparing to your expectations.
It's true. Hi, everyone. I'm Marika Nell. My background is actually in environmental engineering, and I started working on engineering projects as an undergrad because I thought that I was finding technical solutions to environmental problems. And over time, I really saw that technical solutions alone were not enough. Whether it was, someone designing something that people couldn't really use because they hadn't done enough surveys to understand how people were going to use that product. Or ultimately, I went to grad school at Cornell, and my PhD was looking at the water quality impacts of fracking. It's a super political topic. It can be really controversial. And when I was even just trying to get samples, I was hearing, certain stakeholders tell me that I wouldn't find anything because it was perfectly safe and it was fine. And I was hearing environmentalists tell me that it was toxic and it was going to kill us all. And so there was a lot of really strongly held opinions, and it was hard to sort of break through barriers and have real conversations and sort of do the science. And so my work was impacted by policy, or sometimes the lack of policy. And so I started getting into the policy world to sort of understand what the bigger factors were, why these problems existed, and try to find some more holistic solutions. So I applied to the fellowship because I wanted to understand how policy was made. And I wanted the structure that CCST provides, because it is a really complex process. It involves a lot of people, a lot of very technical steps, and it can be hard to get into. I actually started working on advocacy projects or trips when I was a graduate student, but I didn't really feel like I was making progress. I didn't even feel like I had the tools to figure out what I was asking for. And so this program and the training it provides has really helped me see how the legislative process works. And it has absolutely met my expectations in that. It's also been a great way to meet people who are engaged on policy issues that I care about. And so I was actually placed with the Assembly Committee on Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials, which is really applicable to the work that I did during my PhD. But I also had the opportunity to work for the office of the chair, who's Assemblymember Bill Quirk, and I got to broaden my horizons as well. I covered health policy, transportation, and water parks and wildlife, and I also got brought in on other technical issues. So it was a great way to sort of get some depth on the issues that I already cared about, but also expand my horizons and really, get a sense of the other pressing issues of the day and how people are trying to solve them.
Thanks, Marika. And next up, Dr. Jane Park, if you want to share why you chose to apply to the fellowship and how your experience has or hasn't met your expectations.
Yeah, sure. My name is Jane Park. I got my PhD in integrative genetics and genomics at UC Davis. And my dissertation was looking at the impacts of oil spills on fish populations in the Gulf of Mexico. Sorry, I'm in year 12, meaning I started training during the pandemic, and I was placed in the Assembly Utilities and Energy Committee, which was completely different from what I had studied in my dissertation PhD time. But it ended up being kind of like the perfect antidote to what I had been going through as a graduate student. And to kind of go into that, I guess I could talk more about why I applied to the fellowship in the first place. So I was really fortunate in that my PhD advisor was very encouraging of exploring other career options outside of academia. And our field in general, especially when it comes to environmental toxicology and oil spill science, it intersects a lot with talking about policy impacts as well, or vice versa. I was encouraged to take a career aptitude test at some point in my dissertation, and I think it was like the AAAS scientist career aptitude test or something along those lines. And policy, something to do with policy was like one of the top hits on my results. And I just, I had really tried to avoid going down that route. It just seemed so foreign and honestly stressful. And my exposure to policy and the government was through what I was, consuming in the news. And it's like, I don't know if I really want to enter that world, but it sounds it sounded pretty cool from the descriptions and the skill sets that I had that would be relevant, like being able to talk to people, work in a collaborative setting, essentially being somebody who sells an idea to get people to kind of unite behind a common idea and work towards a shared goal. And it's a fast-paced environment, and it's a very human interaction-driven setting, which really appealed to me. So one thing led to another. I did some digging, and I found some UC Davis graduate alumni who had gone through the CCST program, and then I attended a science and policy kind of like half-day workshop hosted by Ben Landis and another CCST alum. And that just kind of like, that was when the light bulb kind of went off, and I was like, that was my last year of my PhD, and it was just like, okay, I gotta apply ASAP and make sure I get my foot in the door for this, because I don't know if I want to do anything else after that. And other than the kind of like half-day experience, it was like a primer on how the state government works. I didn't really have many other expectations other than to have no expectations. I was told to have an open mind, just to really see this as a 1 year, opportunity to try something new. And if I hate it, it's just 1 year, and I can go back to academia, and I would still come back with translatable skills. And it ended up being like, something that just changed how I viewed myself, my role in this society. I didn't realize how many other skills outside of academic research that I had that were also valuable to the wider world. Working on energy topics felt like the solutions-oriented angle to studying oil spills. It was like the first time in my life where I felt so excited to get up in the morning every day. Every day was new. I was learning something so cool and so different every day. And it's really changed how I view what I want to do for the rest of my career moving forward. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jane. So our first question is, how do you feel your experience as a fellow has opened doors for you career-wise? And I think too, if maybe you could share what kind of resources were available to you in your job search, whether it was from CCST or other resources. Maybe we'll start with Marika and then Jane, since you guys most recently did this, and then happy to go to Jane, Mantey, and Geoff too.
Definitely. So I guess I also didn't say I'm starting on Monday to work in the legislature officially as a full-time employee. That's been very exciting for me. CCST does a great job of actually providing professional development and sort of like career exploration workshops throughout the program. That starts as early as the first round of training, and it continues throughout the year. There's also a really extensive alumni network who is very supportive. One of the biggest things I learned, starting the fellowship was that it's totally acceptable to cold email someone and ask them for an informational interview or a coffee chat. In fact, if you really want to establish yourself in this world, it's a necessity. And people are so nice, they're so welcoming, and they're so helpful. Around July, I was getting nervous. Even though everyone told me I would get a job, it's just hard to not be nervous when there's an end date. And so I started reaching out to people, and they were so helpful. There were many people who were willing to sort of keep an eye out for me and to connect me with people. So there's the official resources, and there's also this large informal network of people who are really willing to help the science fellows.
Thanks, Marika. Jane Park.
Yeah, I guess also to kind of expand on that, I think our cohort was really nervous about networking and finding good job opportunities in a remote environment where, especially in this kind of environment, it's very relationship driven. But a lot of the challenges of being remote is that you're confined to the Zoom environment to develop your relationships. And even with that, it was like night and day when thinking about job opportunities, here versus job opportunities in academia. And, there are some parallels where I think, you want to be hungry for opportunities, but it's such a wide world. It's so broad and in this sphere, and it's kind of a vocation. It's a calling, and so people recognize that. And especially as a CCST Science Fellow, where we're transitioning in with really unique qualifications and kind of a little later in our career path, I think that really resonates with a lot of people, and people are really attracted to that, and they want to really encourage that. And so there are people, in my experience, people have been really excited to kind of bring us further into the fold and make sure that we continue on. There's genuine excitement when people say, when we say that we're staying on in the building. And I see this in the CCST alumni. I see this in people I've met very briefly, unrelated to CCST in the building. So the environment, the culture, just here and how CCST fellows are received, there's just a lot of opportunities that I didn't think would be available to us, just from being a fellow in this environment.
Thanks, Jane. Geoff or Jane Mantey, anything either of you want to add?
I just echo what has already been said. The alumni network is gold. The idea that it's both small but growing, and everyone recognizes how difficult the transition could be if you didn't have that support network, but also the recognition that helping someone else out is beneficial to your career too, is that you now have a connection in a place that you could potentially help someone land their next position. So recognizing that it's also a benefit to the person that you're reaching out to was a really sort of key switch that had to go off in my brain, that I wasn't just taking from someone, I was giving back to them in a way. But other than that, everything that Marika and Jane said was absolutely true for me as well.
Yeah, same. My first policy job after the fellowship was due to another fellow, right? I wanted to get into the executive branch, going from the ledge, didn't really know how to do it, didn't really, get the process. There are, trainings on that. It still didn't click for me. But, being able to talk to another fellow and say, hey, how'd you get your job? And have them sort of like guide you through that process. Introduced me to the supervisor, who then was like, oh, you're a fellow. And I'll say right now that, it's actually not super hard to get a job as an engineer or a scientist in California state government. There are actual classifications for that. It happens all the time. But being a CCST, fellow alum gives you, I would say, a bigger leg up, because there aren't a lot of folks who both understand the world of policy and politics, as well as the world of science. And so being introduced by a former fellow and having that on my resume, they were like, yes, we want to hire you. So I would say definitely lean on alums. And then also, yeah, I did a bunch of coffees, and they were all great, even though they didn't lead to a job I wanted. Those are still connections that I still use to this day. And real briefly, I didn't shout out my alma mater, so I'll do that right now. Jane Mantey again, got my PhD from the illustrious Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee, where I studied physiology, pharmacology, and tox.
Thanks, Jane. I think I'm gonna keep the spotlight on you if you don't mind. And the next question is, what was the most rewarding aspect or single experience for you during your fellowship year?
Man, okay, pick just one. I would say in a whole, I think what was the most impactful, and there are examples, but in a whole, it was knowing that even my job where, I'm operating as a ledge aide, which is, low on the totem pole, well, low on the rungs, I'll say that way, to be, that the work that I was doing, could change and benefit the lives of millions of people, right? In California, but also across the country, as California policy can drive what happens at the national level. And so, you know, for example, I worked on a bill that was about child support, which was very, for me, like, why am I on child support? But that bill was to just have child support frozen if you're incarcerated. And a lot of people don't have much compassion for folks who are incarcerated for a variety of reasons, but further impoverishing them doesn't help them to become rehabilitated, right? And so able to work, you know, with counties, with at the state level, working with, you know, members both in the Senate and in, you know, in the Assembly, and went to the House, but you know, working that and working through those tensions, and in the end, you know, getting a bill passed that can provide debt relief for hundreds of thousands of folks who are currently incarcerated and come out with a clean slate and start fresh, you know, meant a lot, not just to them, but also to their families and their kids. Working on EJ policies to go into like very large environmental bills in California, where environmental justice, climate justice oftentimes gets left out, but saying, no, it won't get left out, and leveraging that with my member, you know, as he was the chair of the Black Caucus, and getting stuff through, right, you know, was tremendous and felt really good to do. And so you get some losses, but sometimes you get some really great wins, and you know, it helps a bunch of people.
That's amazing. Thank you, Jane. Anyone else want to share a single memory or best experience from their fellowship?
I'll just sort of continue from that last thread that Jane was talking about. And I disagreed with my member who I was staffing on quite a few issues politically, and that's normal, that's to be expected. It would be weird if you agreed with them on everything. And the day in which it stopped being frustrating was probably one of the most gratifying experiences for me, not because I had learned to lose or anything of that nature. Absolutely not. I still hate that. But more the recognition that, you know, I had made my point to the best of my ability. I had represented myself and my values in a way that was true to myself, but also incorporating my senator and the views of his constituents, but then also recognizing that I had done so in a way that I was going to be invited back into the next conversation, right? And recognizing that many of the issues that I cared about weren't going to be solved with like one grand aha moment, like I stumped you with my incredible fact, you must now vote the way that I want you to. And it was a gradual process, but the day that I was invited back into a meeting in which I disagreed very vehemently with the senator about an issue because he respected my opinion and wanted to hear from me, and he wanted to have that that differing opinion in the room was by far the most gratifying of all the interactions that I had.
I love that. Thank you, Geoff. Jane or Marika, anything you want to add? Otherwise, I'll jump to the long list. Go ahead, Jane.
I just wanted to add, and the counter to that is I think from a more like self-centered perspective is actually just learning about a new area altogether. It was just so much fun to dive into a completely new topic every day. And, you know, having a great mentor and having a great chair to kind of like instill that passion for that issue area was so exhilarating. And so now I just, there's this other big question mark. Like, what else do I not know yet that I would be so excited about? So that's been a great gift for me.
Thank you. Marika, maybe I'll pose the next question to you. Can you share what the placement process was like for you? How do fellows get placed in either a committee, personal office, or in the executive branch?
All right, well, that is certainly a whirlwind. So towards the end of training, we actually did a career sort of exploration exercise with career professionals to sort of really think through our goals, priorities, and also sort of our personality and what we would really be looking for in a placement. So that was a very helpful sort of thought exercise to guide you along the way. And then the fellows interview with most of the available placement offices. There are frequently more offices available than fellows, so you're in a really good position. And it's kind of nice to go in knowing that you already have a job. It's just a matter of which one. And so it's a really good opportunity to practice your interviewing skills, to network, and to find out more about literally like 30 different offices across the California state government. It's kind of overwhelming at times because it is, I think about 2 weeks, sometimes less, of just back-to-back interviews, but it's the only thing you're doing. And so you really get to focus on it and you learn a lot along the way. From there, you actually put together a list of your top rankings, your bottom rankings, and everything in between, and sort of write out your reasoning, like why you thought this would align with your goals and priorities, or what problems you thought you might have with that office. And then CCST does a matching process where they take into account the office's perspective and the fellow's perspective. That is kind of a magic sauce that the fellows don't always totally know the reasoning for, but it works out in the end. It's a great process and you learn a lot along the way.
I'll add a key variable to that magic process. It's the career development piece that Marika highlighted. It's really important that we know what each fellow is looking for and what they're hoping to get out of the fellowship and where they hope to go next. And so we definitely think about that through the placement process. Does anyone want to share, how did your placement go? Did you like your placement? Overall, positive, negative? How did that all land after you made it through the placement process?
I can give my perspective. So when I was going through the placement process, my research background didn't have a super clear connection to any of the offices. So it was a little difficult to sort of say, like, this is the place where I would be a good expert, which I found out actually worked a lot in my favor in terms of finding the work that I actually wanted to be doing. So instead, I focused a lot on, where is an office that I think I would like working with the people, and using the interview process to find, the hierarchy structure within an office, or the personalities, or the work-life balance, and the way in which they distributed work, to be the things that I focused on. And then when I got my placement, like I said before, I disagreed a lot with my member quite a bit politically. So there was definitely a fair amount of hesitation of like, oh, did I actually do this process the right way? Did I misrepresent myself, or did I actually value the things that I said I valued in the placement process? And it took a fair amount of time to sort of let that go and to realize that, like, oh yeah, CCST does know me. They know the process. They know what a year in a legislative office looks like that I don't know. And they did a great job in placing me. And there were absolutely some growing pains and frustrations, but it turned out to be by far the most gratifying year of my professional life, certainly. And I learned a lot about myself and how to engage professionally. So while I wasn't, running down the street, jumping with joy about my initial placement, I'm thrilled that I wound up where I wound up, because of what I was able to work on and how it exercised the skills that I wanted to exercise.
Jane
and I guess
Mantey or Jane Park?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, to expand on Jeff's point of CCST really knowing us, I think for me, because we started training, we were training in a completely remote environment, and there's a lot that's lost, I think. There's a lot that's communicated in person, and I was worried that, CCST wouldn't know who I was, right? That they wouldn't know who it is that I needed to feel supported. And that was, I mean, I should disclaim that my criteria for my placement really was that I find good mentors, a good team that I would feel really supported in. But that's a hard metric to really, that's a hard thing to kind of distill down for anyone, let alone someone you've known for a month. And then over a remote setting. So I remember when I got my placement, I had all these doubts. It was like, are they sure they want me to are they sure they want me to be here? And I know objectively that they're good people, but like, what if they got it wrong? But it ended up being like, I honestly feel like I got the best office, and I felt like I had to really rein it in and like not like brag about it too much, but it really was the best pot. It was a match that worked in ways that I couldn't even have fathomed at the time. So CCST really did a good job understanding us and understanding the offices, and more so than I had anticipated.
Mantey, do you want to add anything?
Sure. I'll say that I loved my placement. I want to say that it was top 5, if not top 3, on my list of places to be matched with, and it ended up working out. Actually I'm in a sorority, and one of the staffers actually was in my brother fraternity organization, so we immediately clicked on that. And was just glad to work with him and share an office with him. My chief of staff was very educational. I would say that, it very much felt that it was a good fit for not just myself, but also for my office. I won't say they needed me, but having somebody with my certain kinds of skills, I definitely felt valued. It was something that they didn't have on their staff. Even the most mundane, is not always just, how can I apply my dissertation or my field of study to this office? It's that, how do I bring a different way of looking at policy, period, right? How do I bring this, scientific, analytical lens to policy, right? Can you do, are you able to just read articles? Can you do a lit review? Like, what can you do? Because people don't come with those kind of skills sometimes in the ledge, and you do. Right. So bringing, new resources, new skills, new perspectives is highly valuable. And then just my member and my chief of staff just gave me a lot of latitude to, to push and to pull on them, but also kept it, 100 and like taught me the game of politics and how it works. And that, all right, we're going to lose right now, but it's okay. We're going to come back, a different time or a different kind of way and win elsewhere. And I found that valuable. So I thoroughly enjoyed my placement. I think it was the best move of the options that are available to me. It wasn't an option I wanted to stay in at the end of my fellowship. I felt I wanted to go and grow somewhere else, but they definitely, imparted to me what I needed to understand how this ecosystem works. So I appreciated it a lot.
Thank you. Jane Park and Geoff Hollett, I know you both shared a little bit in your introduction about some experiences and training you participated in while in grad school that led to you preparing and applying for the fellowship. Do you want to elaborate on any of those experiences or add additional ones you didn't mention?
I can go first. I think once I decided that I wanted to apply to CCST, I knew that the program really emphasizes communication skills. So I went ahead and signed up for the UC Davis Grad Slam, which is, it's like a competition where you present your dissertation in, I think, a minute or two. I think is it 3 minutes? Okay, yeah. And I don't normally go compete, period, let alone in that kind of setting. But I felt like, it was good for me to kind of try something new and push my boundaries. A lot of the prep that helped me during my grad school for the application specifically really did come from connecting with the CCST alumni, either through the more formalized like half-day policy workshop or through like informal coffees and phone calls where I just had a lot of questions about how to highlight, the skills I knew I had that were applicable to the program. And yeah, just really making use of the CCST alumni network before even being accepted into the program.
So I did the same career aptitude test that I believe Jane Park said that you did during your PhD career. My top career path that it told me that I would be good for would be as like a museum docent. So clearly it was that clearly I had a strong affinity towards sort of communication and talking to people, and a lot less of an affinity to sitting in a dark room for hours at a time, which was a lot of what my dissertation research was. So I took basically any opportunity that I could to engage in both science, but also non-science communication. So I also did the Grad Slam event, but at UC San Diego. That's why I knew it was 3 minutes. I did improv to get out of the lab and sort of get up in front of people. I attended as many conferences as I could. And in fact, like a poster session is probably the best experience you could get in talking to a lobbyist about a bill you've never heard of before, but you'd want to engage with people at sort of like a technical level. And then the Science Translators event was sort of that clear thrust into the policy realm, which is an event, unfortunately, has been put on pause as we are remote, but keep an eye out for it returning in the future, which is an event that CCST runs every year, where I believe 3 or 4 of the current fellows class was in my class of science translators. That was to bring people like myself, postdocs, grad students, I believe even some undergrads maybe, to the Capitol and sort of having a real clear-eyed discussion about this is how you talk about research to people that know nothing about research. This is how you become an effective communicator to the people that may be skeptical of what you're talking about, or they may not know that they care yet. And so that was really the thing that really crystallized it for me. It's like, okay, this is where I need to be, and this is the stuff that I need to be doing. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to sneak in one last question here before I ask each of you for some final words. Let's start with Marika and then Jane Mantey. If you could share, what other opportunities did you apply for and consider after graduate school, and what made you pick the CCST Fellowship? Marika.
All right, well, I am a little bit biased because the CCST Fellowship was definitely my top level choice when I was doing my applications, because I was applying before the end of my PhD, and it's one of the fellowships that allows you to do that. And I was really gunning for the policy world and to get out of academia. But at the same time, I was also looking at academic positions that would sort of use those communication skills, like lecturer positions. I was also looking at postdocs, preferably ones that had more of like a communication component to it. So something on a grant that had an outreach plan or something like that. But CCST was by far my top choice because I just wanted to learn more about this world and really put those communication skills to use and have an impact.
Thank you. Jane Mantey?
Yeah, for me, actually, it's the opposite. I actually first wanted to do the Presidential Management Fellowship Program in DC, and that is a whirlwind. I also applied, what was it? I'm gonna forget the name, the one in Congress, AAAS's, program. And then also applied for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, their fellowship. And CCST actually came at the end. It's funny enough, my big sib, those mentoring programs in grad school, she had already graduated. We ended up being in the same lab. she had a dream about me and wrote me on Facebook and said, hey, I had a dream you're going to California. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And literally next thing you know, I'm just doing a random search for other kinds of science, technology, policy fellowships for people who have PhDs, and CCST comes up in the search. And I was like, okay. And I applied for it. And I would say that it felt like the fit. It felt like I would actually get something done. And that's really for me was the biggest draw. You can go to Congress and things move like molasses. Like right now I work on federal policy, move like molasses and then move like lightning in Congress. Whereas, in the California State Leg, things can actually happen. It might take 2 years. It might take 1 year. It might happen within a month, but things happen. And that was a draw for me to CCST.
Thanks, Jane. So in our final minutes here, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to share just one final piece of advice to all of the potential applicants that are listening today. And Jane Mantey, I know you need to leave us early, so I want to start with you.
For sure. What I would share is to bring all of you to, your application, to your interview, and if you become a fellow, to your fellowship. I see some of the questions about, how do I apply my science? And it's like, you're going to figure it out, right? It's going to click for you as to what is needed here. You're going to start to problem solve, troubleshoot, and you'll figure it out. But what's most important is how are you able to transfer what you've learned in the laboratory, in the academy, even just where you live to actual policy work. And when you bring that, you stand out because of your unique experiences you have, what you bring. And that's what people are looking for, right? It is a scientist, but it's someone who understands that in some ways, science is political and has been political, right? And so how do we actually, make science in the best interest of like I always say, people on the planet. So yeah, bring all of you and don't be afraid of that.
Thank you, Jane. Geoff, how about you?
My advice would just be do it. If you are interested enough to be on this webinar and to be even asking the questions, you are interested enough to apply. It is scary and weird, and but I also am so happy that I did it. If you do have any other questions, I really want to echo what has come up a couple times, is that reach out to people. The science policy community is small, but also growing, and we tend to be very understanding of the trepidations, and your questions are probably going to be the exact same questions that we had when we were going through the same process. So I shared my email in the chat. I encourage everyone to reach out to me if you have any questions. If I don't answer, bug me again. And to ask a lot of questions, because programs like this are one of the easiest and best on-ramps to the science policy world, because it is so unusual to be able to walk into a legislator's office and say, hi, I'm a scientist, I'd like to work for you. Most people have no idea what to do with you. Even when you get placed there, most of them won't know what to do with you. But it's programs like this and some of the sister organizations across the country that really allow for people like us to have the impact that we want to have. One other note that I will say, just in case anyone, I saw there were a couple of questions in the chat, is that I am not an American citizen. So if anyone has any questions about sort of how to navigate that process of applying or even working in American policy while not being a citizen, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Geoff. Marika, any advice you want to share?
I guess in a lot of ways, the policy world is more similar to academia than you might think. Like, your transferable skills are truly transferable, and other people have highlighted that. But we get a lot of questions about what life is like as a fellow, and it so depends on your specific office, your specific tasks. Like, you know, my experience in the legislature is totally different from Jane's experience in the legislature, and the placements that CCST has span the breadth of California state government. But that means that like you should really be honest about what you're trying to do with this fellowship, because there are a wide breadth of opportunities within the fellowship, and there probably is room for people that are more interested in a certain area or expanding their area, or people who are more interested in like hands-on tasks that involve like maybe some data, whereas I have pretty much not worked with data all year. I am trying to make sure that we have data-driven policy, but you know, I don't have time to be looking into like specific data. I need other people to tell me what the data are, and then I, as a scientist, can assess if what they're telling me is true. So, you know, be honest about what your goals are, what you're trying to solve, and really think about the skills that you have that you can put into a new setting, and that's the beauty of the fellowship.
Thank you, Marika. Jane, any last advice for the potential applicants?
Yeah, and you know, I just want to bring it all back to the beginning with Jane Mantey's advice. It's you know, really bring your whole self. I mean, like so your PhD, you know, your skills in the lab, your skills as a scientist, they're just one part of the greater toolkit that you have to offer. I drew a lot of what made me successful in my lab were actually the same skills that made me successful here, which is just the love of talking to people, the love of working with people, being really interested in a problem that I want to solve. And, you know, those are the same kind of qualities that made me successful in other areas of my life. I had other hobbies, I had other facets to my identity, and I could bring all of that, and all of those parts are celebrated in my office. And, you know, that's what people really pick up on. That's what, especially post-fellowship, you know, going forward in my new job, it's people remember you for being you and not for being just a scientist or just a policy person. So really, you know, don't be afraid to dig deep and talk about the things that make you in your application. And yeah, you should definitely just apply if you're in this webinar. It's really fun. It at the very least, it's a self-reflection tool, right? So I highly recommend.
Thank you, Jane. And thank you so much to all four of you for spending your time with us today. I really appreciated you sharing your experience and your opinions. I hope it was really helpful to everyone in the audience. I know there were questions we didn't get to. Please feel free to reach out to me or any of the panelists. We're happy to connect you with other alums if others might be more helpful. And in particular, I know there were questions about work-life balance and what does a day actually look like? And so our next webinar will be December 16th, and that will focus on life as a fellow. So we'll get more into those specific like day-to-day questions. So I hope you're able to join us for that one too. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.